So bored.
Hello, my lovelies. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. Welcome to Nikki Gets Bored. I took a nice long winter break. It was great. Do you know what we're going to do today? We are going to finish off Yersinia pestis. That's right, Yersinia pestis won't infect us. No more bubonic plague. Just kidding. I love you, boobos. I won't throw you. No stuffed animals were harmed in the making of this show. The list of outbreaks I've been using has the Antonine Plague, the Black Death, the 17th century plague, the 18th century plague, and then the third plague. That's 5 bubonic outbreaks. So why is the last one called the third plague? That ended up having an easy answer. The plague officially has 3 outbreaks: the Antonine Plague, the Black Death, and the lamely named Third Plague. Everything else was just a part of the waves of these plagues. So they were just outbreaks of these 3 big outbreaks, the big plagues that we had. I don't always agree with how history is portrayed, but I'm super okay with these 3 plagues because I checked out the 17th and 18th century plagues. They were doing all the same things, which was basically trying anything in the hopes that something would work out. Like they no longer threw dead frogs straight from the pond onto an open sore. No. Our 17th and 18th century ancestors had the decency to kill the frog first. So I guess maybe a little stride in the right direction. What's with putting animals on things to fix them? I don't get it. My point, we didn't make any improving strides, and the same things kept happening. I'm not saying they weren't interesting. Go read some of the stories. Most involve pee. Maybe you're into that kind of thing. To each their own. A few outbreaks went airborne. Pneumonic plague is bubonic plague airborne, and it kills phenomenally faster. It is fascinating and sobering to see how fast it destroys. So please go find some stories about it. For Nikki Gets Bored, we are skipping over the 17th and 18th plagues listed on our list of outbreaks. We've already covered the same stuff in earlier episodes, and they don't technically count because they are part of the bubonic plague waves.
Waves?
The third plague started in China around 1855. Cameras were around at this time, so we have pictures instead of paintings to show what happened. It spread throughout Asia and reached Europe by the late 1800s. Historically speaking, Europe, mostly Britain, were practically in control of the entire world. They had colonized pretty much everywhere. Several years before the third plague, President James Monroe did tell all of Europe, hey, North and South America, off limits. We are no longer letting you colonize here. Stop it. We don't want you. But Europe still sailed there and had colonizations they still brought stuff to and did trade. All the sailing and trade done is what caused a disease that was an epidemic for centuries to become pandemic. Every inhabited continent got Yersinia pestis. All of the earth was plagued with the plague. No! India got it the worst. Out of an estimated 12 million that died, 10 million were in India. It was a British colony at the time. It was super populated and it had terrible hygiene. All the trade and travel between Britain and India, it killed a large portion of the Indian population. The British government put laws in place to help with the spread. The laws were different for people in India. They didn't understand why they were meant to do these things. Their hygiene and their medicine were so different, they were just confused. Little that the British mandated made any sense to them. This caused the Indian people to not trust the British. It led them to starting to want their independence, something they do eventually get when they tell the British to get. Get Britain, get shoe. To give you a reference for the time frame, this is just a few years away from when Gandhi was having peaceful protests, including his long march to harvest salt. So we are getting very close to India making its independence from Britain. The third plague could have caused hundreds of years worth of waves, just like it did during Antonine's time and during the Black Death.
Watch out! Big wave coming!
However, it's the late 1800s. We're in the 19th century now, baby. Cool. Medicine has come a long way. No more frogs wanted dead or alive on your body.
It's a miracle of modern medicine.
By the time of the third plague, humans even had microscopes around for about 100 years. So, science types got to work. In 1894, a bacteriologist named Alexandra Yersin, does that sound familiar? Yersin? Yersinia pestis? Alexandra Yersin discovered and named the bacteria Yersinia pestis. By 1905, scientists had figured out that rats and fleas had a huge role in the spread. And then the British government strong-armed a guy in India who's named Waldemar Haffkine to make a plague vaccine. Well, he had a really small team, but he managed to come up with a vaccine in just 3 months. He first tested it on himself. When it didn't kill him, I guess. Yeah, he then tested it on volunteers at prisons in India. The prisoners that had vaccines were still alive 3 years later. 7 that didn't get the vaccine had died. I couldn't find how many were actually given the vaccine, what the test numbers were, but it did turn out to be about 55% effective. By 1900, just in India alone, 4 million people had been inoculated. You know, maybe the third plague isn't a terrible name. The third plague that hit Egypt in the Bible were fleas and gnats. So the third Yersinia pestis plague is when we figured out that fleas carry the disease. If this was in any way a factor in naming this wave of outbreaks, I give you kudos. Well done. Let's have a sidebar. Remember when COVID came and people were afraid to get the vaccine? Do you see my face right now? This is the face I make when I've turned on my mouth filter. The reason I've felt no fear when the vaccine came out is because we have been inoculating people since 1721. For 300 years, we've used the vaccines and they've worked. The CDC estimates that since 2011, about 11 years now, vaccines have saved around 23 million people's lives. That's not to say there aren't problems that sometimes happen with vaccines. It happens, but the list is just really short. My research only turned up about 9 times that a vaccine backfired in some way. Even the COVID vaccine caused blood clots in some teens. Those are very few cases, 3 cases to be exact. So 3 people died from the COVID vaccine. 6,705,827 people died from COVID. Unvaccinated people have a 17% more chance of dying from COVID than someone who's been inoculated. My heart, it truly aches for the families that have lost loved ones. I feel so bad for them, but I also feel I made a wise decision for myself. If you like an episode of Vaccines Gone Wrong, please tell me in the comments. And my sidebar is over, thanks. In 1940, we humans discovered antibiotics. And we don't have to worry about the bubonic plague ever again. The CDC worries about it. They track cases and do things to halt any spread. But we don't have to worry about it anymore. Isn't that nice? That is the end of our study of Yersinia pestis. The past episodes, the Antonine Plague one, taught us all about the disease, the silly ways people tried to stop it, and the horrible thoughts they had about what caused it. And in the Bubonic Plague episode, we learned that we had learned nothing since Antonine's time, and we learned about the horrible ways they blamed groups of people for causing the disease. This episode, we learned about the third plague and how far we as humans have developed in science and medicine, and how we finally conquered Yersinia pestis. I skipped a lot of good information about society and how they responded this time around. Like how people still burn things for disinfecting, and that somehow meant burning down entire towns. And it included all of Chinatown and Honolulu. Or how in South Africa, measurements taken to keep safe included finding ways to segregate based on race, because it was believed Black Africans were dirty, which was not true. Or how the British burned down poor Indian homes and made people go to the hospital, which back then in India, that was a place you went to die. Really, there's a lot to unpack and several different ways to look into this time in history. As always, I hope that what you've learned today starts you into learning more about it. Remember, we learned history to stop doing the same dumb things over and over. So dig in and enjoy some knowledge. Next episode, we're going to go off schedule. I'm giving you a special episode. I normally have a poem before my ALS update, but I'm working on something different, and it may not even come to fruition, but if it does, you'll know about it. Today I'm going to cover all the perks of having ALS. What? Yeah, there are bright sides. There are really bright sides to everything, the silver lining, if you look for it. Eventually I'm going to go over depression, something I do go through. So let's start with fun stuff instead. We can be sad another day. What is the bright side of having a disease that will paralyze and bankrupt you before killing you, likely by suffocating on your own liquid that your muscles aren't strong enough to cough out of your lungs?
Yikes!
Well, I can only tell you about what I find positive about it. So my list, my wheelchair. Look at how fancy this is. It starts at butt level and goes to eye level. It tilts back, lifts my legs, and stretches out. I've slept in my chair mostly comfortable many times. I have an air cushion that keeps my bum from being sore, and it goes up to 6 miles an hour, a speed I doubt I could have gone using my legs. Plus, I always found running to be way overrated. Bubble guarding. Another thing my wheelchair does is it guards my bubble. Sure, it makes hugging very difficult, but my chair makes it impossible to enter my personal bubble. My past career had me interacting with a lot of people from Brazil. I love Brazilians. They are so open and outgoing and bubbly and loud, but in a good way. Culturally, I found their personal bubbles were near non-existent compared to Americans. My chair always kept me comfortable, allowing me to help them with ease, no anxiety. It's nice. Butts. You may have heard me say that being in a wheelchair puts one at fart level. It's true. When fluffs of flatulence waft, I'm usually the first target. That being said, I also have a perfect view of butts. I get the best view of backsides. It's true. I'm not really a butt person, but everyone appreciates a nice caboose from time to time. And if you happen to have one, I might look at it. And people just think I'm looking where I'm going. Doctors. I really hope you never have to have a team of doctors. I do, and I'm lucky to have great ones. I'm also getting the best medical care possible. I have a neurologist, a nutritionalist, a speech therapist, a physical therapist, an equipment therapist, breathing specialist, a social worker, and a good old regular therapist. And they all meet me at the same place at the same time. My appointments will take 4 to 5 hours, but you better believe I leave knowing we are doing everything we can. And I see them every 3 months. Help. Do you have any idea how difficult it was for me changing from being completely independent to someone who constantly needs help? It was a nightmare, but I'm getting used to it. And again, I'm lucky to have such good help. My parents do most everything for me. The ALS Foundation is always there to assist if they can, and they are an incredible resource. The Joe Martin Foundation, which is only in North Carolina, helps by getting me equipment like my shower chair and my Hoyer lift. A Hoyer lift is a little machine that gets me out of my chair and into bed. They also provide and pay for a wonderful lady named Lynn. Lynn comes 3 times a week and she gets me out of bed. She gives me a shower. She makes me all pretty. And then I ruin it in bed the next day and my hair's not as good, but she makes me pretty. She gives me bunny therapy. She also takes me on errands, gives me health advice, helps me get things I need. She cleans and organizes for me. A lot of the time, she's my counselor and she's become my friend. She's a jack of all trades. And my parents do all the same things for me on other days, minus the shower. So she also gives my main caregivers a really big break. So we're very appreciative of her. Nice people. Needing so much help has shown me how wonderful people can be. People constantly ask if I need help. Doors are open for me. Things are carried for me. Strangers have helped me put my coat on. I had a stranger move my car for me once so I could get in via the ramp. The other day I went to mail a box. The store had been closed in an hour, but someone inside saw me, let me in, and shipped my box. Why? Well, she said she knew how hard it was to get places in a wheelchair, and she's right, and I was so surprised and grateful. I can only think of 3 times that people were not willing to help. Sadly, not everyone looks like they need help, so you don't get to witness all the willingness people have to step up for one another. That being said, if you do need help, don't be afraid to ask for it. People are willing. Joyful noises. La 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 la. I can't sing anymore. And it's really upsetting. I'm still working on getting over it. Singing was communicating and comfort all in one for me. However, I can still make joyful noises. They aren't on key, but they are joyful. Most ALS patients lose the ability to talk, and I will eventually. Until then, I'm super thankful I can still speak and I can make joyful noises to music. My van. I can't drive anymore, but I still have a van. It has a ramp and space for me inside. Not driving is still something that upsets me, but I'm so thankful to have a handicap accessible van. Public transportation isn't too terrible in North Carolina either. There's a special van that I can schedule to have take me anywhere I need to go within city limits. They don't come to my house because I'm out of the city limits, but they meet me at a close drive away. It takes sometimes hours to get where you need to be, but I nap or I read. So The point is, without my van, I wouldn't be able to do anything. So I'm incredibly happy to have it. Heated socks. Whew, if you've never had heated socks. So my legs don't work and my limbs don't need as much blood. This has led to my feet always being cold and kind of purple. I asked for electric heated socks for Christmas and got them. I'm happy to report that my feet stay a pretty peach all day long. Also, it should stop the neuropathy that started from always having cold feet. Heated socks, people, they're good stuff. My IUD I'm thankful for. An IUD is a form of birth control that is inserted into a woman's uterus and it lasts 5 to 8 years. I never needed birth control. Soon after being diagnosed, I realized one day I wouldn't be able to put a tampon in by myself. It's not something everyone would think about if they have perfectly good working muscles. For me, tampon inserting was my limit. Butt wiping? I got used to butt wiping. I can handle that now. But tampons were a hard line for me. So I went to my wonderful gynecologist and we worked out what would be best. And for me, the IUD stopped my period. And there are side effects of the IUD, like I now have cysts on my ovaries, but by the time they are big enough to cause problems, well, I likely won't be alive. And not to be blunt and kind of sad about it, but to me, that's a blessing. Trying new things. I've always been someone that starts a project, but doesn't always finish it. I mean, obviously I do sometimes, but it was bad enough that my friends teased me about it. Now that ability to not finish things, to just not care about quitting, it's really come in handy. So like, I have projects I start, but I can't physically finish them now. Like painting. I love painting. I have a painting that's halfway done. I can't lift my arms anymore, so I quit painting. But now I work with clay, making it into fun things like Christmas ornaments. And when my hands stop working, well, I'll quit it and find something else. Out with the old, in with the new. Dying. Why in the world is dying on my bright side list? Well, I don't have to worry about a lot of things now. Like I eat what I want because I likely won't live long enough to die of a heart disease or a stroke or any other bad habit death. And I fear things less now because what's the worst that can happen? Death? What do I care? Bring it, bring it. I hate not being in control, so not fearing death is super helpful when others drive me around. If I'm being truly honest, getting a fatal disease was a huge blessing. It took me time to see it this way. The things I used to worry about, I don't anymore. I realize how important it is to live life, not just to the fullest, but to the best of your ability. It makes me more sympathetic to everyone. It makes me want to tell people I love them more. It weeded out my true friends. It made me stronger. It pushed my relationship to God to another level. It made all my relationships more important. I stopped caring about my career and my future. I started caring about people and life. So much of ALS is carrying both sides of the coin. One side, dying sucks. On the other side, dying is a blessing. And it's up to me to decide which side of the coin I keep facing face up. God is on my list. I'm a believer in Jesus. The Holy Spirit resides in me. I feel it. I hear God talk through it. What I want to do is tell you all about my experience and about the awesome news of what God and Jesus is doing for us, for our future. He's preparing things for us. I want to tell you the hope I have and feel because of that future. I want to show you how real He is. I want to, but I won't. Maybe one day it'll be an episode. For now, I want to tell you that the last few years of work which were the first 3 years with ALS. I was so adamant about fighting. I wanted to fight this with everything I had and not let it change who I was at work. And I took it on myself and forgot to pray or even read the Bible. I never stopped believing. I just forgot to check in. I did everything myself, and what happened was I became a crazy person. It didn't help that every time I ate, I'd have uncontrollable diarrhea, or that I kept peeing myself, or that I couldn't reach anything, fit anywhere, or open the doors without help. I couldn't control my emotions anymore. I never knew when something was going to make me angry, which was a lot. And I couldn't even have a conversation with someone with any authority without breaking into tears and my throat closing up so I couldn't talk. I got mean and short and cross with everyone. I wasn't a good peer or a manager. I was still pretty good with the customers. They liked me, but that doesn't cut it. In fact, I should probably take this time to apologize with everyone I worked with back then. I'm sorry for my terrible behavior. After an embarrassing several years of my life, when I finally realized that I had accidentally turned from God, I made changes immediately, and there was a difference immediately. The truth is, I can't manage this life without God. Nor would I want to. Learning how easy it was for me to turn away was humbling and shameful. Being back is warm, comforting, it's hopeful, it's calm, it's pleasant. Most importantly, I stopped being a mean, crazy pants. I'm incredibly thankful for my relationship with God. I'm not afraid of dying because dying means no more sinning. It means to be with God. You get to be with God. And I can't wait to give Jesus a big old hug and a high five. That means that alive for us. Good job. These are just the big ones, but I find the bright side in all sorts of things. But for now, let's wrap up. I hope you've all learned a great bit and laughed a good bit too. I love you all, and I ask that you take care of one another. I'll see you next time Nikki gets bored.